Hello and welcome to another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is Martin Isaac. He is president of an organization called Connecticut Against Gun Violence. We'll meet him and learn all about the organization when we come back, so stay with us. Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is Martin Isaac. He is president of an organization called Connecticut Against Gun Violence. It's your first time on the show, so welcome to the show.
Thanks very much.
Let's get right into it. The name sounds like it would speak for itself, but describe Connecticut Against Gun Violence as an organization. What is it?
Sure. Well, we're a 20-year-old organization. We've been here for a while. It's a grassroots organization. Connecticut Against Gun Violence, it is just that. It's against gun violence. It's not Connecticut Against Guns.
Right.
But we've been around for a long period of time trying to, the mission really is to protect Connecticut families, the communities, in particular the children, from gun violence.
Right. And, we were talking off the air before we came on today. The timeliness of us airing the show right after the Sandy Hook tragedy. Your executive director was just completely inundated with media requests to the point where, you had to step in and kind of wear the PR hat as well for a while, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, I think within the first couple days after that Sandy Hook incident, I think he did around 100 interviews in the first 2 days.
And in just a couple of days. Amazing. And obviously not just Connecticut media, but national.
No, it's been an
media.
international story, and in particular, when the international folks are talking to us, they are just amazed at the gun culture here in the United States.
What kind of questions were the media asking of you and the organization after Sandy Hook? What kind of questions were they?
Well, again, I think it's a little bit different from the domestic versus the international. In domestic, it's really, what are we going to do? All eyes are on Connecticut. What's going to happen here in Connecticut?
Yeah.
Internationally, it was maybe even a little bit more broad than that. Of why is this happening here? You have so many guns, 300 million guns in this country. Why are you so different?
What happened 20 years ago when this organization was formed? Talk about its sort of birth.
Yeah, it was started by a group of women after, again, another incident. I think our executive director really got involved, though, I'd say, right after Columbine, which was just over 10 years ago at this point. Unfortunately, it seems to be, it's one of these horrific incidents where people get more involved in this. It touches them, and they really want to get involved and try to make a change.
I do a radio show, too, and one of the topics that came up was there was already like a producer or somebody kind of making the rounds, considering the possibility of like a Sandy Hook movie, and it seems disturbing. And if there was going to be some sort of movie, it would certainly be, I would imagine, in a documentary sense, and you really wouldn't have kids really involved in the movie at all, except for telling their stories. And people were very outraged at the possibility of that. But keep in mind, there were certainly more than one documentary-style movie after 9/11. There was a Columbine movie. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it.
I don't know. It's not a new story. I mean, this happens again and again and again. There was a documentary made after the Virginia Tech massacre. It's called Living for 32. Colin Goddard is a survivor of that, and it was made and produced by Maria Cuomo Cole.
And it was a documentary style?
It was a documentary style, and it's incredibly moving. But each time after these incidents, there is this rush, and I don't know if we need another documentary per se. This story has been told 100 times. What we need now is some action. Yeah.
So what kind of action? What is what are the primary objectives of Connecticut Against Gun Violence?
Well, it's really common sense reform. It's common sense changes to our gun laws as they exist today. And when you think of the gun violence issue, there's two types of issues that are out there. There are these massacres, which are happening more and more frequently, and unfortunately right in our backyard this time. But there's also the day-to-day gun violence that exists through the country. You've heard the stats. Chicago, 500 people killed in 1 year. And we heard the president just yesterday talking about this. But our legislation, our agenda is really to deal with both of these issues.
Your opinion of the NRA?
You know, I have two opinions. I have an opinion of the NRA membership itself, which when you look at all the surveys, by and large, you know, I've seen numbers that 75% of the NRA member base tends to agree with the type of things we're recommending, common sense reform to the gun laws. The NRA leadership is very different, and I think they're
very political.
Well, it's political. They're extreme in terms of their response to this. It's almost everything but guns are the cause of this.
Right, very defensive, in other words.
Very defensive, and what's surprising to me, because you hear for years you've always heard the NRA say it's not the guns, it's the people, yet there's this resistance even on basic change on background checks. But, you know, again, when you come back to the NRA membership itself, and there's surveys out there, the Hartford Courant just did a survey recently as well, and in particular in Connecticut, there's an overwhelming majority of people that want basic changes made, and I'd be happy to talk about those.
Yeah. People would automatically think that, you know, an organization named Connecticut Against Gun Violence would be against the NRA, but that certainly isn't the case, right?
It's not about being against the NRA. No, I mean, when you look at our membership, we have hunters, we have sportsmen, sports shooters. It's about gun owners and non-gun owners coming together for common sense reform.
And how about the Second Amendment?
We're big believers in the Second Amendment. You have absolute right to own a gun. There's no question about that. Frankly, you know, my thought was when the Supreme Court ruled in the Heller and McDonald decisions recently, those were over the last 2 to 3 years, that this was going to be good for this debate. Because once and for all, there was agreement you have an absolute right to own a weapon, a firearm. And once and for all, there was agreement by the Supreme Court came out and said, you have a right to regulate this. This is not an unlimited right. So, you know, I thought with both extremes being eliminated, you know, we could get some things done and really protect America.
Is the Second Amendment still, you know, applicable in the sense that, you know, when it came about, you know, citizens and the government both had muskets, you know, but now, you know, the government has cruise missiles, and, you know, your private citizen doesn't have that.
Yeah, well, you know, you hear different arguments out there, and I think the Second Amendment, you know, some folks on the opposition will reach to real extremes. That this is about, you know, come that day where we need to fight the U.S. government, we need to be able to keep and bear any sort of weapon.
Right.
But I think, you know, those, if that really is your position, you know, those days have come and gone. You know, if you are going to take on the U.S. government,
yeah, you're not going to need more than your musket.
Yeah,
right?
it's, well, even if the most powerful weapon that you could buy as a consumer today, that is certainly not going to protect you. So I just don't believe in that argument.
So let's get into the meat and potatoes of some of the changes that you'd like to see made. You know, obviously, you know, the big thing is automatic weapons. Does the average, you know, citizen need that? And you know, and what the, you know, the perpetrators did, you know, in a lot of these situations where tragedies occurred. So talk about that a little bit.
So automatic weapons are not, and automatic weapons have been illegal for a long period of time. So we're not talking about the automatic weapons. We are talking about semi-automatic weapons in this assault, pseudo-military assault style weapons. And that's what we're talking about getting rid of. There are two things here. So getting rid of those type of weapons, and more importantly, the high capacity ammunition magazine. There is no reason for civilians to have these pseudo-military type weapons. There's one reason. These things are great for doing one thing, and that's killing people. Mm-hmm. This is not about self-defense. This is not about hunting. This is not about sports shooting. And, you know, these weapons are out there. They shouldn't be out in civilian hands.
What is the argument on the other side why they think that just because it's their right to own one? Or
I think that's a big part of the argument.
Yeah.
There's a concern of the government taking these things away, and you know, what
Civil
if I have to?
liberties,
What
yeah.
if I have to fight the U.S. government? But again, I think it's a fringe, because the overwhelming majority of the American people are absolutely in favor of this. The overwhelming majority of the NRA members, the members themselves, are in favor of this. So the argument for why you need to have more than 10 bullets in a magazine is a weak argument. It's a weak argument.
What was your opinion of the, was it in New York or New Jersey somewhere where they decided to post the names and addresses of every gun owner in a certain county or something like that?
Yeah,
do you remember that story?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah.
I'm not an advocate of that at all. That's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Again, you know, there are extremes on both sides of this issue. There are extremes on people on the gun rights. There are extremes on the people, you know, I'll call it on our side of the issue. This is not about a rush to take away everybody's firearm. That's not what our organization is about. There are certainly some people in the country that want that, but that's not what we want.
Does it always seem like it takes some sort of tragedy like the Sandy Hook situation for people to suddenly take the initiative to learn more and to become more aware. And quite frankly, it was probably a lot more people learned about an organization like Connecticut Against Gun Violence after something like that.
Yeah, unfortunately that's true, and it's quite understandable. I mean, listen, it's a busy world, there's a lot of things happening out there. But I can tell you this, I've had time and time again where people have almost been apologetic for getting involved in this issue kind of so late.
Yeah.
I was at a conference in New Haven the other day, and the inner city violence we have in our state is horrible.
Yeah.
And if you don't live there, you may not be aware of it. But there are people that are coming into this issue that wish they had been involved earlier because they want to make a change.
The majority of the people that you talk to, they seem to have your point of view in the sense that they're not necessarily against gun ownership per se, or the right to have a person be able to defend themselves, but like you were talking about, the need and the necessity for semi-automatic weapons.
Well, I think across the board, what we've heard from people is I've not heard people say remove the Second Amendment. I'm not saying people don't have a right to own a gun, which is why our coalition is gun owners and non-gun owners, because the issue, it's not about that. It's like saying, because you're against drunk driving, you're against all cars.
Yeah.
Don't take the position to the extreme. This is about common sense reform.
Right. And since it happened, has your day-to-day duties changed when a major tragedy occurs, especially one in our backyard here, compared to what you were doing before that? Obviously, the legislature. Are you sort of like you're an advocate, but are you also sort of a lobbyist in a way?
Well, yeah, certainly we're talking to the legislators out there. I mean, they're the ones that have to stand up and make change. And in the enormity of what happened here in Connecticut, I am hoping our legislators are going to stand up and do the right thing and really protect the citizens here. I have people I talk to, and they're puzzled of why is it that our government isn't protecting us. A man said it very well at the Newtown hearings, and he talked about, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Why is that trumped by somebody's ability to have a military weapon? It doesn't make sense, and for most of the people here that I've talked to, it doesn't make sense to them at all.
I think it's worth noting again that you had already mentioned the fact that your organization consists of, like you said, hunters, people who enjoy outdoor life, gun owners. So it's not just a group of, like radical individuals that just want to outlaw the Second Amendment and the NRA and anyone who might carry a gun.
No,
too.
I mean, let's talk about some of the common sense things we're talking. I talked a little bit about getting rid of the military type weapons. That's only a small piece. We're talking about common sense things of universal background checks for every gun purchased. Why would that be a difficult decision? Talking about requiring a permit to purchase ammunition. Why would we allow somebody to have a gun, whether they have it legally or illegally, but then not check if they're qualified to buy ammunition for that gun? Why do we allow people to buy an unlimited number of handguns in this state? Trafficking of weapons in the inner city in particular is this horrible situation, and it leads to people dying literally daily.
Could you ask the question, why would a person need to buy an unlimited amount of handguns? I mean, why would you even need that?
I don't know why you need it, and we're not saying that you can't do that. I mean, you can own as many guns as you want. What we are recommending is put limit in place and say, you know what, you can buy one handgun a month. And when I talk to people around the state and they say, really, that's your proposal? That's a limit that we have to take some baby steps here and make some changes. The goal is to stop trafficking. So, what's different about, a lot of people compare the gun trade to the drug trade. The very big difference is the first purchase of these guns, tightly controlled, done legally. The question is, how did that legal gun end up in illegal hands? This isn't brain surgery to put a system in place to deal with this. It just has not been done.
As far as what is allowed legally right now that you would like to change, what in your mind is the most outrageous that you think needs the most immediate attention of all? Is it the waiting period? Is it just simply the background check, or what is it?
I don't think there is one magic pill, because there really are two different things going on here. If you were going to say what's most important to me in terms of stopping the massacres and getting these military weapons out of people's hands, it's clearly putting the limit on the high-capacity ammunition magazines. Absolutely. In addition to that, we can't have these military, pseudo-assault weapons in their hands, because there's no purpose for society to have this. But that does not take care of the inner city. What needs to be happening, the day-to-day violence we see out there are limits on how many guns can be purchased, effective background checks for any type of gun purchase, permits for ammunition. So you see, there is not one magic pill. I think if there was one, it would be done already. But it really is dealing with this situation in a bigger way.
Even before any major tragedy occurs, one could ask why, like a universal background check seems like a common sense thing for a weapon, for a gun, and why wasn't it instituted long ago? Is it because people were fighting against it and just thought it might, intrude on their privacy a little bit more?
Yeah, I was listening to some of the testimony from a federal level yesterday, and people were bringing up this fact of, well, why wouldn't I be able to sell this gun to my brother-in-law? I know him. Yeah, but we don't know him. And why should anybody be afraid of a background check?
Maybe you don't know your brother-in-law as well as you think you
Well,
might
why
do
do we force everybody to go through a scanner when they get on an airplane? I'd vouch for you. You seem like a great guy, but somehow that's not good for the rest of society.
Right.
So, I just plain out don't understand the argument. And again, I think it's a fringe. It's a vocal fringe. But most people are for background checks. Most people are for everything that we're talking about. So I know it's exciting to have these controversies and try to get different people on different sides of the issue. But if we really took a fair representation of what people want, it would be kind of a boring discussion because everybody is saying we want these changes made to our gun laws.
I think the media does have a tendency, just for the sake of an interesting conversation, or even to the point of an interesting argument, to try to get someone on each side and just go at it and just sort of step back and just in their minds enjoy the show for a few minutes.
Yeah, listen, there are extreme positions again that you could put in place, but that's not representative of society today, I'd say.
As we tape the show, you had mentioned this earlier, the president gave the State of the Union address last night. So as far as what we're talking about here today, from what he mentioned, what did you take out of it?
I was encouraged. Now listen, getting things done at a federal level is much more difficult than getting things done at a state level. That said, no matter what we do in Connecticut, unless we change things at a federal level, we're not going to adequately protect people here in Connecticut. We could have the strongest background checks, the strongest laws in the world, and if all I have to do is drive an hour and go to a state that has weaker laws, how much did I really accomplish? Our goal at Connecticut Against Gun Violence is to create a template that other states can mimic and really put a strong set of laws in place. I'm hopeful, and I was in Washington, D.C. on the first march, it was around a month ago, and spoke down there, and we need to get changes done at a federal level. But we shouldn't, it's not one or the other, it really is both.
Would there be some states where there would be, the pushback would be more significant? Maybe, there's gun manufacturers there that have their own lobbyists that are pushing their agenda, which may not be in line with what you were talking about and things of that sort?
I think clearly the gun culture is different in different states, there's no doubt about it. But I think, again, if you come back to, this is not a discussion of whether you should own a gun or not. And if we were having that discussion, clearly people feel differently. This is not that discussion. This is a discussion about common sense reform, and even in those states, many people are in agreement with what we're talking about here.
It probably should also, it's worth mentioning that Connecticut Against Gun Violence as an organization, it's not a political organization in the sense that you would take one side versus the other. It's not about, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives. It's just about, really what it says, against gun violence.
Yeah,
period.
It's hard to, why would you be against this platform? And listen, people are not against the platform of stopping gun violence, but some are overly resistant to making changes in the law. And for the life of me, I really don't understand it. I don't understand why they will not do this. There's a fear, I think, of retribution from these PACs out there. But as Senator Murphy has said recently, that impact is way overblown. They don't have the power that they it's implied that they have, and I think the latest election cycle proved that out.
Do you find, because of situations like Newtown, that your organization gets more members because of that? I mean, are you getting an influx of people that want to be more involved?
Yeah, we've been absolutely flooded. I think when it hits so close to home, this rises up in terms of your priority list. And we had an NRA member or an NRA organization, I believe, from Wisconsin saying, we'll just wait on our lobbying efforts. We'll wait for this Connecticut effect to float by. It was really disgusting.
Yeah, what do they mean by the Connecticut effect, by the way, until our nerves, our emotions calm down and we get back to some semblance of normalcy? Is that what they...
I think that's what they're saying. This is important in this short span of time, and we'll just wait them out. We'll just wait out, and hopefully legislation will come in place here, and then we'll go back to our regular way of doing things later. Listen, the opposition is passionate, they are well organized, they're well structured, and they've done an incredible job from their perspective changing the laws in this country. And what it takes now, we have to have a real conversation about the gun culture here in this country. Again, we're not talking about taking away guns, but how do we want to live?
Do you always find that you have to, when people... You're not defending yourself, but when you describe your organization, it seems like it's almost, you feel the need to say, listen, we're not talking about taking away your right to bear arms or own a gun, because it's almost like people think that automatically without understanding what your organization is.
Yeah, I've come to this because often when I begin a conversation, if there's someone on opposition in the room, they may not be opposed to what we're saying today. They believe this is leading to something. It's not leading to something. The Supreme Court is ruled on this issue. We're not leading to removing all guns. So they jump to this, and this is their defensive posture in terms of organizing their base and trying to get not even common sense change made, because they say, well, if you make this change, what are they going to ask for next? And it's just, it's a really unfortunate situation, because again, the bulk of the people want these changes made.
And again, members of Connecticut Against Gun Violence, many of your members own guns, right?
Yeah, right on our board as well. And it's helpful to have that perspective. One of the things that happens, and we saw this in testimony as well, many people that are not educated on guns, that don't own guns, that are scared of it, they don't really know exactly what to ask the legislators. They want to be safer, but they don't know necessarily the right way to ask it.
They're just not informed or educated enough on the subject.
Yeah, so it's hard to say, what do you want? For example, when I talk about why a ban is important to me on the high capacity ammunition magazine, and a ban is important on these pseudo-military type weapons, you hear the legislators sometimes say, well, what exactly does a ban mean? Does that mean a ban on future sale? And to me, if that's where we end up, it's not satisfactory. That would be saying that the Connecticut of December 14th, the Connecticut of Sandy Hook, is acceptable. We'll let whatever weapons and high capacity magazines are in the state, we'll just keep it that way. We won't sell them anymore. And maybe someday in the future it'll be a little bit safer. And if that's really what we do, that would be a very big disappointment.
Have you yourself personally been in a heated debate or discussion with someone that may be on the other side of this issue?
Yeah.
And you've had do they understand it a little bit better after you give your point of view and vice versa?
No, I tend to ask the first question is, the Second Amendment says keep and bear arms. Should there be any limits on that? And some people look at that and say, well, no, it says keep and bear arms. There should be no limits, no infringement, case closed. From their perspective, machine guns, anything that could be accessible, keep and bear, would be fair game. I don't have a lot to say to people that have that point of view.
Because you figure they've made up their mind and that's pretty much what their mindset.
The Supreme Court's talked about this. They said that's not what we're talking about. You have a right to have a weapon in your home, and the state has a right to regulate this. So if we're not starting from there, I don't really necessarily know the best way to proceed. We have a different point of view.
Right, you're going to really be in opposite directions from that point on. Really.
What I will say is, clearly there's people all through the spectrum, and not everybody agrees with 100% of the platform that we bring forward, but some people believe with a lot of it, and I do find a tremendous amount of common ground, even with the hard gun owner that owns many, many guns. They still look at this and say, all these things that you're talking about, these seems like the right things that we should do.
People watching this show today, if they're interested and they want to get involved with Connecticut Against Gun Violence as an organization, what can they do and what can they expect when they first make contact? What are some things that they can do to be involved? Just be an advocate?
Yeah, it's not hard. When I got involved with this, I didn't really know what it meant to be involved. So there was a hearing in Hartford a number of years ago I went up to right after the shooting of Representative Gabby Giffords, just over 2 years ago. And I didn't know what that meant to give testimony. Give testimony, my gosh, is it a scary thing? It's not. It's just going up and telling the legislators, how do you feel about this? And what we really need is a silent majority to stand up and say, enough. Enough of this. We're going to take back our communities. We're going to keep our families and children safe, but you need to be specific. You can't just say, I want to change in the gun culture. What do you want changed? If you want high-capacity ammunition magazines banned, then tell your legislator, this matters to me. I want them out of our state.
You need to be very specific about what you want.
Yeah, because the legislator doesn't necessarily know. I know I'm trying to keep the community safe.
Right.
What are you telling me to do?
And you sound passionate, but I just need you to be a little more specific about it.
If you want to make sure people have a permit to buy ammunition, tell them. If every gun purchase needs to have a background check, tell them. If you don't want people to buy an unlimited amount of guns, how many handguns should you be able to buy in a month? Tell them.
Right. Got a website for people to go to and learn more?
Yeah, thank you. You can go to www.cagv.org, and there we have a lot of information. You can sign up, and we have a sign-in area that will keep you abreast of alerts and important elements that are happening around Connecticut. We also have a Facebook page, facebook.com/Connecticut Against Gun Violence. and it's a lively dialogue on there, almost daily posts. So if you want to get educated, that's a good way to start as well.
Okay, and as we get ready to wrap up the show, I always a lot of times like to ask, if there's anything that we missed out on, any misconceptions that people may have about the organization in general, anything you want to say to wind down?
Well, I'd say this. It's not about the organization. The misconception I think people have, even as I talk to my friends, is, what could one person do? So yeah, I agree with you, but, I'm busy and I'm worried about a lot of stuff. Unfortunately, the way the system works is, yeah, you have to raise your hand. You have to make your opinion known. If we're going to get this change, the silent majority has to stand up, and it's not a big request. It's about talking to your legislator and telling him it's important. But I think that's the misconception, because I think people think it's hard to do. It's not hard to do. You can find it right on our website. You can find who your legislator is, and it'll take 2 minutes to reach out to talk to them and tell them that it matters to you. So I think that's probably the biggest misconception is, well, it matters to me, but boy, I just don't have the time to get involved. Yeah. Really everyone does. Just make it a priority and take 2 minutes and do it.
Is the process really slow, even though once you do get involved, as far as once it gets to the legislators, their next moves, is it like a long, slow process?
It's going to be very interesting to see how this goes. I believe in, here we are in the middle of February. I believe some set of laws are going to be proposed, some set of bills will be proposed in an emergency certification process. And our hope is this is significant. All eyes truly are on Connecticut. If we do not have a sufficient response to this tragic disaster that occurred here, I think it'll be horribly shameful. And I'm hopeful the legislators stand up and really react appropriately.
Are there other states that have similar organizations to this?
Sure.
Maybe different names, but they just kind of have the same sort of mantra?
Sure. Yeah. And well, and what you see, I'll leave you with one interesting stat. Connecticut probably is rated by the Brady organization. I think they say we have the 4th or 5th strongest gun laws per se. And if you look at the top 10 states with the strongest gun laws, 7 of those top 10 have the lowest homicide per capita. You see a direct relationship between the power of your gun laws and the safety of its citizens.
Martin Isaac, the president of Connecticut Against Gun Violence, thanks so much for being on the show today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us for another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. We will see you next time. Take care.